Learning progressions can be a great tool for me as a teacher of writing. They can help me to think about what it is that my students need and what my students need next. Here's one way that you can use learning progressions. So the first thing you'll want to do is have a whole set of student writing. It's tempting sometimes to only look at the best, but by doing so, you're not getting the full range of what your students are capable of doing. From that whole set, just choose a random sampling. You're aiming for 10 to 20% of the total. So if you're sitting with colleagues, then you're looking for 10 to 20% of the total of all of your papers together. Once you have that 10 to 20%, sort it into 3 piles: low, medium, and high. As you're doing this sorting, go with your gut and also talk it out with your colleagues. It's really helpful to hear how other people would rate things. Once you have your piles sorted, then name the traits that you recognize in each of the piles. So what might this look like? Well, I have 3 different classifications: low, medium, and high, and I have a pile of student work. So I'm just going to read each piece individually and just think about, where does it go? This seems kind of average for what I would expect. This next piece, wow, this one's much better than the last. This one also seems really quite good. This one, it seems a little bit lower. I'll proceed with my colleagues, talking as we go about which paper we think belongs in which pile. Once I've sorted my 10 to 20%, then we'll look at each stack individually. What we're going to do is see if we can name what are the traits of each of these that they have in common. When we see that, we will list those traits down below. We'll continue with this for each of the separate piles that we come to. After we have classified and named the traits of each, then we can use the learning progression that we've just created to evaluate additional student work. So now what? How can this help me? How can this help my students? How can this help my colleagues and I? Well, for one, it helps me as a teacher to think about how I can help individual writers move. One of my favorite questions to ask is, how many conferences will it take to move them to the next level? Or I can think about what might be the next move, the next most important move for this writer. I can help partners use a learning progression together. I can even use a learning progression to help individual writers set personal goals for themselves. And if my colleagues and I are all doing this work together, then we will have some level of uniformity across our grade level. So that's one way that I like to use learning progressions to help me as a teacher of writing. Hope this helps you too.